There's something quietly devastating about walking into a room full of people and feeling completely invisible. Not ignored exactly, but unnoticed in a way that cuts deeper than any harsh word ever could. You scan the faces around you, hoping for that flicker of recognition, that moment when someone's eyes light up because you've arrived. But instead, you're met with polite smiles that fade quickly, conversations that continue without you, and the sinking realization that if you disappeared right now, it might take hours before anyone noticed. This is the hidden ache that lives inside more people than we care to admit. The desperate, gnawing need to feel wanted. Not loved, not admired, not even particularly liked. Just wanted. Just significant enough that your presence matters to someone somewhere, in some small way that makes your existence feel justified. We don't talk about this need because it feels too vulnerable, too raw, too much like admitting we're fundamentally broken. Society teaches us to be independent, self-sufficient, complete within ourselves. But the truth is, humans are wired for connection so deeply that the absence of feeling wanted doesn't just hurt emotionally. It rewires our brains, changes our behavior, and shapes every relationship we'll ever have. The need to feel wanted begins before we even draw our first breath. In the womb, we exist in perfect symbiosis with another human being who literally cannot survive without us, just as we cannot survive without them. We are wanted in the most biological sense possible. Our very existence is necessary for the continuation of life itself. But the moment we're born, that certainty vanishes. Suddenly we must earn our place in the world through cries that demand attention, smiles that invite affection, and behaviours that make others want to keep us close. Psychologists have discovered that this fundamental need operates on both conscious and unconscious levels, driving behaviours we don't even realise we're performing. When a child learns that being helpful earns them praise, they don't just want to be helpful, they need to be needed. When a teenager discovers that being funny gets them invited to parties, they don't just enjoy making people laugh. They become terrified of the silence that follows when their jokes fall flat. When an adult finds themselves indispensable at work, they don't just take pride in their competence, they panic at the thought of being replaced. Research reveals something profound about human psychology. We don't actually want the other person as much as we want the other person's desire. We want to be wanted. This distinction matters because it explains why so many relationships feel hollow, even when they appear successful from the outside. You can be loved by someone who doesn't particularly want you around. You can be needed by someone who resents that need. But being wanted, genuinely desired for who you are rather than what you provide, touches something ancient and essential in the human psyche. The modern workplace has become a particularly cruel arena for this psychological drama to play out. Studies show that 1 in 5 employees globally report experiencing loneliness at work. But this statistic barely scratches the surface of what's really happening. Workplace loneliness isn't just about lacking friends at the office. It's about the crushing realization that your contributions don't seem to matter, that your ideas fall into silence, that your absence wouldn't create any meaningful void. Consider what happens when someone consistently feels unwanted at work. They begin to overcompensate, volunteering for projects no one else wants, staying late to help colleagues who barely acknowledge their efforts, desperately trying to make themselves indispensable. But this creates a paradox. The more desperately someone tries to be wanted, the more they push others away. Desperation has a scent that people instinctively avoid. The digital age has complicated this ancient need in ways we're only beginning to understand. Social media platforms have weaponized our desire to feel wanted, turning every post into a plea for validation and every like into a small hit of artificial connection. But these digital proxies for being leave wanted often us feeling more hollow than before. You can have thousands of followers and still feel profoundly unwanted. Because deep down, you know these connections aren't real. They're performances, transactions, substitutes for the genuine human recognition that your soul actually craves. What makes this need so hidden is its shame. Admitting you need to feel wanted feels like confessing weakness, like revealing you're somehow deficient in the self-love department. But this shame only drives the need deeper underground, where it festers and grows more powerful in the darkness. The people who seem most self-sufficient, most independent, most together, are often the ones whose need to feel wanted has become so overwhelming that they've learned to bury it beneath layers of competence and control. The tragedy is that this buried need doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes the voice that whispers you're not doing enough, not being enough, not offering enough value to justify taking up space in this world. It transforms into perfectionism, people-pleasing, chronic overgiving, anything that might finally earn you that sense of being genuinely desired rather than merely tolerated. Watch someone whose need to feel wanted has gone underground. They become experts at reading rooms, at sensing the emotional temperature of every interaction, at knowing exactly what to say or do to make others comfortable. They develop an almost supernatural ability to anticipate needs, to solve problems before they are even articulated, to be useful in ways that feel almost magical. But beneath this competence lies something darker, a bone-deep terror that if they ever stopped performing, stopped being useful, stopped making life easier for everyone around them, they would simply cease to matter. This is where the hidden nature of the need becomes most destructive. Because when you can't name what you're hungry for, you'll try to feed it with anything that resembles nourishment. You'll mistake being needed for being wanted. You'll confuse being useful with being valued. You'll trade your authentic self for a version that others find more palatable, more convenient, more worth keeping around. The neuroscience behind this reveals something profound about human survival. Our brains literally cannot distinguish between physical threats and social rejection. When we feel unwanted, our nervous systems respond as if we're facing mortal danger. Stress hormones flood our bloodstream. Our fight or flight responses activate. Our bodies prepare for battle against an enemy that exists entirely in the realm of perception and social connection. This biological reality explains why feeling unwanted isn't just uncomfortable, it's excruciating. It hijacks our entire system, making clear thinking nearly impossible and rational responses extremely difficult. When someone is drowning in the need to feel wanted, they're not being dramatic or attention-seeking. They're responding to what their brain perceives as a life or death situation. The most insidious aspect of this hidden need is how it teaches us to abandon ourselves in service of others' comfort. We learn to read every micro-expression, to adjust our personalities like thermostats, to become whoever we think others want us to be. We develop an almost pathological sensitivity to rejection, seeing signs of unwantedness in neutral expressions, delayed responses, or simple human distraction. This hypersensitivity creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you're constantly scanning for evidence that you're not wanted, you'll find it everywhere. The friend who doesn't text back immediately becomes proof you're annoying. The colleague who seems tired during your conversation becomes evidence you're boring. The romantic partner who needs space becomes confirmation that you're too much, too needy, too fundamentally flawed to deserve consistent love. Living with this hidden need is like walking through life with an open wound that everyone can see, but no one is allowed to mention. You become exhausted by the constant performance, the endless audition for a role in other people's lives. You start to wonder if anyone would choose you if they didn't need something from you. You begin to question whether your relationships are built on genuine affection or mere convenience. The workplace becomes a minefield where every interaction carries the weight of your worth. You over-prepare for meetings, hoping your contributions will be so valuable that your presence becomes indispensable. You say yes to requests that drain you, terrified that setting boundaries will reveal you as selfish and disposable. You watch colleagues form casual friendships and wonder what's wrong with you, that similar connections feel forced or artificial when you attempt them. In romantic relationships, this need manifests as a quiet desperation that can suffocate even the most patient partners. You find yourself constantly seeking reassurance, reading meaning into every gesture, every pause, every change in tone. You become hypervigilant about signs of waning interest, sometimes creating the very distance you fear by your attempts to prevent it. The hidden nature of this need means it rarely gets addressed directly. Instead, it gets medicated with achievement, numbed with busyness, or temporarily satisfied through relationships that ultimately leave you feeling more empty than before. Because when your sense of worth depends entirely on external validation, you're always one rejection away from complete collapse. But here's what we don't often realize. The need to feel wanted isn't a flaw to be fixed. It's not evidence of weakness or proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're human. It's your soul's way of reaching for something essential, something that every person who has ever lived has needed in some form. The tragedy isn't that you need to feel wanted. The tragedy is that you've been taught to hide that need, to be ashamed of it, to bury it so deep that it becomes a wound instead of a bridge. The path forward isn't about eliminating this need. It's about transforming it from desperation into discernment, from performance into presence, from hiding into honouring. It starts with the radical act of admitting the truth, not just to yourself, but to the people who matter. Because when you stop pretending you don't need to feel wanted, something remarkable happens. You give others permission to admit they need it too. And in that shared vulnerability and that mutual recognition of our fundamental humanity, real connection becomes possible. You're not too much. You're not too needy. You're not fundamentally flawed for craving the thing that makes us most human. The need to matter, to be chosen, to have your presence create a warmth that your absence would make someone miss. That's not pathology. That's poetry. And maybe, just maybe, the world needs more people brave enough to admit they want to be wanted. Because in that admission, we find each other. And in finding each other, we discover that being wanted isn't something you have to earn. Sometimes it's something you simply are.